hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. How exciting is this? We have a TV studio in our brand new office space. So thank you so much for spending some time with us. Yes, we are coming to you live from our new office space. This is in the Calgary Beltline neighborhood, and we're so excited that you can spend some time with us. My name is Leah Sarich, and I am the head of story for Thin Air Labs. And well, we're here to tell you a little bit of a story. So we'll have an update for you on how far we've come since our launch event back in January, and we'll show you a video of our beautiful office space without the whole the TV business going on, so you can get a good idea of what it actually looks like. And then yes, we'll have a conversation with our capital and managing partner, James Lochrie, about our investment thesis and the fund we're raising in order to build a whole new economy for the Prairies. But first, let's say hi to all three of our partners who are here. We have Jim Gibson, who is here, and Greg Hart, and yes, James Lochrie. And look at these guys taking their masks off. This is good. Hi, guys.
Hello, Leah.
Thanks so much for being here. Isn't this fun?
It's a ride.
We all are very excited about the lights. It makes us look fabulous. So we got to get these in all the time, don't we? The lights?
Absolutely.
We love them. Jim, let's start with you. Give us a little update on what you've been up to since our launch event back in January.
Well, I just wanted to comment that this is actually for Leah getting back on live television. So that's why we're here. But
exactly.
It's been an extraordinary 10 months since we had our launch event in January. But as I was getting prepared for this session, I was thinking about and reflecting on the 4.5, 5 years that we've been really digging in to the ecosystem, and the seminal event where the three of us actually first met, which was the rainforest movement back in 2016. And in that moment, we created this concept and this idea that community and the ecosystem really matters. And so since that time, we've grown an amazing group of people and an amazing company. We've been delighted. But this last 10 months, I can tell you, has been super interesting. In the last 5 weeks for me, most of you, or some of you, will know that I just joined as the chief catalyst. I went from the chief amplifier, I think was my title back at the beginning. Now I'm the chief catalyst at SAIT. But really importantly is that Thin Air recognized the investment in the community by me having joining SAIT. I would take a leadership role in the key area of talent. One of the most important things that will help us move more quickly is talent, and we're behind. We need to 10x the number of startups in our ecosystem. We need to move more quickly, and the talent area is one area that we want to invest in very deeply. The other areas that we talk about is culture. And culture, I like to say, is a bucket with holes in it. You have to keep filling it. And one of the things that Thin Air believes hugely is that we need to invest in that culture. We need to invest in the people and the talent and the companies, because living, growing companies need a great soil to thrive in. And so by letting me take the role at SAIT, the Thin Air team's investing in that talent pool, and I'm super excited to be a part of that. I miss these guys a little bit, but I am definitely a part of the team. I'm working really hard to bridge that. And in fact, SAIT said to me, the reason why we wanted you on the team is because you could bridge that gap to the brand new entrepreneurial ecosystem that is emerging. And I take that very seriously. And I'm just delighted to have two of the best jobs in the city. So thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim. Let's move on to Greg. Greg, what have you been up to on the design front with Thin Air Labs?
Well, virtually nothing. No, actually, listening to Jim, it's kind of like none of these things really happen by accident. And yet, at the same time, they do happen by accident. And so we talk about design a lot. And what I mean by that is that we do have to create conditions for things to happen that we want to have happen. And they're not always linear, that we just push this button and all of a sudden something happens, but we do need to create those conditions. And then that allows for all sorts of interesting things to emerge. And to Jim's point about needing to kind of leapfrog as a community and do things better and more quickly than lots of other people have done in other places, then design becomes really important. And so what we mean by that is really creating the conditions for success. And so we've been doing that for since the launch party, with a variety of different organizations, some of them who are just startups and some of them who are well-established organizations, which are an important part of that community as well, people who will hire or buy from startups. And so for us, working with them, it's about, what does success look like for them? And we talk a lot about occupying the future. I mean, success for a venture is about being able to stake out a place in the future and successfully occupy that space, not in something that's already been done or is really crowded. And so the design work that we've been doing is helping organizations establish the parameters, all those conditions that allow that to happen, both for products and experiences that they're producing for people that are their customers, but then also for the internal operations of their organizations so that they can scale without bureaucracy and not go through a lot of the grunge that other organizations have gone to that frankly cost a lot of organizations their lives in terms of being able to make that huge impact in the world that we're looking at. And I mean, today, part of this event, we'll get to meet a few of those kinds of companies that are out there, but there are dozens more, and we couldn't be more excited about tackling more opportunities in that way, helping people build what's next.
We like doing that, don't we?
We do like doing
We do like doing that. Thanks so much for that, Greg. And James, before we get to our official conversation, we do want to show you that first look at our office space. So let's roll that video now. And then James, tell us a little bit about this, why we wanted to work with Housebrand and really build this beautiful space for us to be in.
Well, first of all, I mean, Housebrand is a local design firm that we wanted to support. They're also entrepreneurs of ours that we work with in building the Fab Home. And as you can see, they've done an amazing job of creating this open, welcoming, well-designed space that we're really excited about. That it really shows a great example of our commitment to this city, and Calgary being our anchor of where we want to grow. And as you can see, I love this open area because it's open areas and collaboration spaces like this that you're seeing now that allow us to innovate in ways that are collaborative, that are transparent and comfortable, which is an important part of the creative process of a startup. So we're really excited about what we've done, and I think this is an environment that we're going to be able to build a little bit of future industry and build what's coming next.
See, we said it again, building what's next. We really like that. And we're so very excited about our space.
We do.
All right, let's have this conversation. So James, a lot of us here are wondering, let's talk about that investment thesis and what we're really trying to do and the strategy behind it.
Well, it's pretty simple. We want to make a lot of money.
Yes, we do.
We're investors. So the goal behind investing is make a lot of money. And you can do that in many different ways. And people do that in many different ways. Our philosophy is founder first. And we want to do it that way because this is a human-powered industry. And when you think about, especially in the early stages of companies, when those founders are working with their small teams, the power of a founder and his or her team is incredible. The influence they have to move quickly and aggressively against their opportunities is second to none. So what we do is we back those people, and we put our investment into a company. As far as capital goes, that goes on the balance sheet, but then we put other investments into our founders. And we want to make sure that they are going to be successful at pushing forward their companies. So when we think about founder first, that's what we want to do, is make sure that our founders, can have the capabilities, capacity, and confidence to be able to take on these types of things. And that's the way that we want to drive it. And we look at diversified industries. So we're not sitting here saying we're an energy investor or we're just a SaaS investor. We're looking at innovative technologies across a number of sectors that allow us to be a diversified firm and have a lot of different options in front of us as they emerge in front of us in the economy. Most importantly, though, is human impact.
Yeah.
And we talk about this a lot in the organization. It's one of the core fundamentals of how I as a person operate and importantly, how Thin Air Labs operates. And what I mean by that is when we're working on a project, we're trying to measure what is the impact to human beings, because we believe that that is the most important thing that will drive the economic success of a business long term.
And why not do that? Why not do both, right?
Why not do both?
Why not make money and have this incredible human impact at the same time?
Sounds like fun to me.
Right? Let's do a bit of that.
Yep.
So human impact is really important. And actually, you've got some examples of companies that you wanted to tell us about where you can really see that human impact right away.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see Tina and come up here and talk about Cyantra in a little bit. There's another company up in Edmonton that we work closely with. We've been invested with them for a little over a year. And they're just commercializing. They're called True Angle, and they have created a medical device to help people retrain their swallowing muscles that may have been damaged from head and neck cancers or stroke, injury, or psychological disorders. And surprisingly, that's an enormous global market. Wow. But if you can imagine how important it is for those people to get that service at the time they need it and to help them through that problem, the impact is enormous. So when you think about ROI on an investment into a company like that, those customers are going to pay top dollar, they're going to tell all their friends, and they're going to keep using the product as long as they need it and makes them successful.
Right.
That's what we're looking for in our businesses, to be able to create that type of commercial opportunity and invest in it, and then support the entrepreneurs as they take that to market.
True Angle's such a great company.
They are.
They really are. How do you choose companies to invest in? What are you looking for? What are you thinking about?
Well, going back to the basics, ROI is important. Right? So the economics of how you build a company, how you make an investment is a critical part of how we assess which companies we work with. We are obviously looking for large global markets, and we want to invest really early, which is not quite typical for an investment firm in Canada. We're looking for teams that are passionate, that have resiliency, that have domain expertise, deep domain expertise in the areas that they're working in. And they have to be a fit with our organization as well. So we're looking to be active investors. We want a partnership with these teams. And so their capabilities mixing with our capabilities, their vision mixing with our vision, we're trying to grow things to global success. So we need to make sure there's tight alignment around how that works. And these are 10-year relationships.
Right.
So fit is critically important.
Right. That's so exciting because you're really investing in the long-term growth of that company. And so you want to make sure that fit makes sense right from the beginning.
Exactly.
That's so exciting. So you mentioned this a little bit in terms of what stage that you wanted to invest in, but yeah, we're really looking at that early stage, aren't we?
Yes. And what drives that stage is the multiples we're trying to get. I know it's aggressive and some people might roll their eyes at this, but every investment we look to make, we're looking for 100x on our money. And that is possible in today's environment. And that's, like I said earlier, that's very different than the way that the investment firms in Canada work. And that's largely because they're looking at how do they get their money into a company at a point when it's de-risked. So they've got customers, they have traction, there's market validation for their product. Whereas what we do is we start earlier. And we work with those founders to ensure that they get traction, to ensure that they have great teams that are supporting them, to ensure that the market develops the way they want to. So that's the difference that Thin Air Labs brings into it, and that's really how come we can look at that early stage, because we can deal with risk a little bit more effectively.
I think we should dig into that a little bit, because that is really unique to Thin Air Labs, and what we do is we interact with these founders right from the very beginning in various different ways, and that really does manage the risk. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So we've got the design and community capital.
Yes.
So let's think about that. Let's talk about the design and how that works, and then the community and how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. The design is a fairly obvious one. There are, when you think about a company that comes to you, founder and their team will come, they're like a snowflake. Everyone is different. Each one has different capabilities. Each team has different capacities. Each team has different levels of confidence in their abilities to execute in different areas. And so what we want to do is, through the design process, is understand what a company's areas of strengths and weaknesses are, and try and match up where our strengths meet their weaknesses. And how can we support their strengths and 10x those. So that's how design really works, and it's really a learning process and an iterative process of working with companies as they go through each and every challenge. And it's not always the same. A company in the early stages could work with us really extensively and then take a break because they're competent at the work that they're doing, and then they may circle back to us a year later because they need help with their next fundraise, or they're looking at approaching a different type of product in their market. So that's how design can work for us. With community, though, it's different. Community is an investment into an ecosystem. And when you think about the medical world, it's a great example of it. It's a hard community to break into. So these medical entrepreneurs have a lot of regulatory barriers. So in our design team and our community team, we work with those types of organizations, whether it's health services, other health organizations that could be buyers of this technology or distributors of them, and we find ways for our companies to work with those companies as well. So it's a holistic approach to creating an environment that can springboard these companies into a higher level of success.
Right, and manage that risk.
And manage that risk.
There you go. So let's talk about what types of companies that we like to focus on and why.
Yeah, so big global markets with significant human impact is, we've already covered that. I can't stress it enough that those are the two key drivers of our investment thesis in any type of business we're looking at. And then as we look at, across industries, we're looking at very, very much disruptive trends that are affecting different types of industry. So two great examples of that are enterprise software and the medical technologies.
Right.
So in enterprise software, you and I have been walking around with these phones in our pockets, these supercomputers for 10 years. Collaboration, communication, connectedness, our ability to be efficient has dramatically increased as individuals. I mean, we get our groceries delivered to our house, or food. We don't even have to go to restaurants anymore. That's not the way the world works in the enterprise space. So there's all of these individuals who have created this different level of competency, technical competency in their personal lives, but haven't translated that into their professional lives yet. And that wave is well underway, which we'll see a couple of entrepreneurs talk about some of the enterprise software that we're working on.
Yeah.
We're starting to see that happen dramatically. And in medical, as the technologies, the AIs and machine learning technologies, especially those, move themselves into imaging and diagnostics and therapeutics, we're going to see that accelerate really dramatically. So working on those types of areas, health, people and talent, enterprise technologies, cities of the future, planetary sciences, those are sectors that we focus on. We see amazing trends that are happening that are disruptive in those areas.
Right. And we are somewhat unique that way. We try to be open-minded about
Absolutely.
who we're working with, don't we?
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing about investing in innovation today is, there is great discipline about having an investment thesis and saying, we only focus on X, Y, or Z. And I agree with that for some people. But for us, we are early stage. We don't know what's coming out of the ground tomorrow. We don't know what somebody's going to invent. So we've got our ears up and we're paying attention. So we're not going to behold ourselves to a thesis that might make us say no to the next great company that's coming out of Calgary or the Prairies.
Right, got to be open-minded, I like it. So let's talk about the Prairies. So, a lot of people are looking at the Prairies now and they're thinking, wow, what's going on there, right? So what do you want investors to understand about investing in the Prairies specifically?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time here, right? We've got this, there's obviously some struggles that have been happening in the commodity cycles that drive the economies in the Prairie, whether it's agriculture and or energy. We've had some struggles over the last 5 years, and that's been hard. But I think more than anything, it's a crisis of hope and optimism versus an economic crisis. And so focusing on where we can win, in addition to our core strength as an economy, is a really important way to move forward and invest here. Because let's face it, we have some issues when it comes to diversification. Those are well documented. They're hard to solve.
Right.
But technology is a fast track to being able to do that. And the other side of it is, this is one of the greater places in the world to start businesses. Canada is a fantastic place. When you think about the policy in Alberta for starting business, the low tax regime that we have here, the pro-business standpoint of government that's across the Prairies, amazing place to start a business. And we've seen in technology, it's no different here than it is in Toronto or Vancouver, Silicon Valley. We can create billion-dollar businesses right here. So why not do it?
So why not do it? And I think a lot of people are also observing that there is a shift that's happening, right? People are noticing that there is a shift that's happening, particularly in Alberta.
Yeah, and I kudos to local government. So when you think about what's happening in the municipal government here in the city, there is a strong focus on innovation as a diversification strategy. When we look at the policy shifts that have happened at the UCP level, with the province, they have completely pointed towards an innovation future, a friendly future here with both policy and tax regime changes. I'm really excited about what's happening. And when you look into Saskatchewan and Manitoba and what policy is happening there, we are seeing some of the really great stimulation around what we can do for innovation and commercialization of those things.
Yeah, it's an exciting time here, isn't it?
Yeah, and then on top of that, investors are starting to win. So we're starting to book some wins. So investor sentiment is shifting as well. So we're starting to see more and more capital coming locally into this part of our economy. And the success of those companies is driving foreign capital to come into our environment as well, which is a win-win situation for everybody.
It really is. We should talk about that a little bit, so that we've already seen that this investment is really shifting. This thesis of ours is actually starting to work well, and we're already seeing the results of that.
Yes, absolutely. I'm pretty happy with our performance so far. I'm not going to be shy about saying that. When we look at our companies that we've made investments into, there's 17 of them that we've invested in. There's 3 more that are pending imminently. There's been $100 million of additional capital that have gone into those companies. They've created approximately 600 jobs across Alberta. And the results on the return on investment, I had a great run at Wave, and it was pretty amazing. And the IRR I got off of that was about 67% annualized, which is a phenomenal number. This portfolio is doing better. It's early days, but it's doing better. And that's really exciting to me, and you're going to see some of the reasons why it's doing better in a very short period of time.
No kidding. Yeah. Let's take a moment to talk about jobs too, because we're hearing a lot in the news these days that jobs are a real problem right now. So what are we talking about when it comes to jobs and the jobs we're creating?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that these companies grow exponentially. They're not a linear growth company like most areas. So as we see these 600 jobs that have been added in approximately the last 4 years, I'm anticipating that there's going to be between 1,200 and 1,500 jobs created by these companies over the next 12 to 18 months. So it's a real shift in how we employ people and the types of people and skill sets that are required here. And it's another, to plug another thing that we're doing here is the Inception U initiative that we run out of thin air. They run the Evolve U program, and we educate people to be able to work in these types of jobs. So it's a major shift that's happening in our workforce. And we're talking about a small group of portfolio companies that are in our world. Imagine what's happening outside of that as well. So there's a real shift when it comes to jobs that's occurring, and everybody is aware that it's happening now.
Right. Let's take a moment too to talk about our operational process as well, right? Because that obviously is working really very well, and it's just only going to grow from here.
Yeah, I think that just goes to that aspect of partnership, right? When you think about a North Star and how you operate as a company, you need to have some things that everybody has as touchstones that allow you to go forward. And for us, it's all about partnering with our organizations for their success. It's easy for, an investor that's having success to get their ego and put it in front of everything else that's happening. But what I know to be true is when we can remove our ego from anything that we do and put our founders first and ensure that they're successful before we're successful, well, we'll be incredibly successful. So that's really about that's how the processes are developed, with those touch points in mind about how we operate as a company and how we support our entrepreneurs. And so we designed all of these processes, whether it's community, design, or just governance, or other types of things that we do with people, and networking. It's all about developing the entrepreneur and their team for future success. It's pretty simple.
It is pretty simple, but it is pretty special and unique to us. I always like to talk about the fact that we're so good at relationships and at people, and that is something that we're exceptional at, and that goes to that founder first principle.
Yeah, and again to that, what I was talking earlier about people-powered businesses. These are creative businesses, and we need these to be powered by creative, open-minded, and supported people. And when we started this company, we set a goal that we wanted this to be the most important investment company in Calgary. We have bigger goals than that longer term, but I believe that we've taken the first few steps towards making that a reality.
Wow. It is so exciting. James, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
So as you can see, we have a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of it so far is working really well. But what we wanted to do was give you some examples of what that actually looks like. So we've invited 3 founders that we've been working with extensively to come down and talk to us and talk to you about the impact that James Lochrie and Thin Air Labs has had on that process. So we're going to start with Hanif Joshigani, and he's actually joining us online. Look at this. This is the magic of television and technology right there. Hi, Hanif.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, Hanif.
James is here too, Hanif, so you can talk to him as well.
Hey, James, I've been listening.
So, Hanif, why don't you tell us a little bit about Cement?
Sure. Cement is a company that's just under 4 years old. We have a platform focused on helping really large organizations orchestrate and execute very refined, intelligent, dynamic digital customer engagement strategies. And then we have a analytics and science group that works with our platform to as part of a managed service to help these large organizations think through exactly what kind of strategies and engagement models to deploy on top of the platform, and what does all the data mean, and how to optimize at a high velocity. So the largest user case we have today is we work with most of the world's largest telcos in North America. At least we're by far and away the number one player. I think we'll be 80% market share on the telco side in North America by the end of this year. So every time somebody is at risk and there's a risk of churn, or they need to do some retention work on a customer and they're trying to orchestrate all those engagement strategies, you think about like 10 to 20 million engagement strategies per day per customer. Our system is what they use to design all those strategies and execute them.
Wow. And you do this by creating empathy as well, don't you?
Well, yeah, that's kind of like the whole point of the science, right? So we built this really powerful platform, and then we built a scientific team that designs like full of like people with behavioral science, neuroscience, cognitive science, data science background, and they're designing strategies. We view those strategies we put on top of the tech as effectively part of the product, where the whole point of it is to basically be far more behaviorally aware in how you, instead of just overwhelming them with messages to get them to respond, it's like understand, talk with them, understand their situation, and try to get them towards better outcomes instead of just trying to like overwhelm them and make them submit, as it were.
There you go. So, Hanif, tell us a little bit about how James Lochrie and your interaction with Thin Air Labs has really helped you sort of grow and expand your business.
My relationship with James Lochrie predates Cement.
You guys go way back.
Yeah, and I met him at my last startup that I'd started, and I immediately, we immediately hit it off, and both before I launched Cement and then since I've launched Cement, where James is an investor, I've just looked at him as a mentor. The best way to learn is to one of the easiest ways to avoid a lot of pain is to learn from other people's mistakes and successes. And James Lochrie has always consistently been one of the people that I've relied on, drawing from his experience as I try. The faster you move, the more you need to rely on experience. Almost the same way in sports, you need muscle memory to make good decisions at high speed. Drawing on other people. If you don't have the experience, drawing from others is the best way to do that. And so James Lochrie is one of the key people chirping in my ear as I try to figure out what to do as I try to make decisions at high speed.
Nice.
Now, he's giving me way too much credit, because this guy is an amazing leader and CEO, and there's no doubt that he would have built this incredible company without me, but it's been an incredible pleasure to be part of the journey with him, and they make me look like a really smart investor every single day. So him and Tiffany have done such incredible work in establishing something really special here in Calgary and showing the way for future entrepreneurs that they can get it done here and create a global, world-beating company.
It's so exciting. So Hanif, tell us where you guys are going next. What's next?
So we're about 215 employees right now, and conservatively, we'll probably be around 500 to 600 by the end of 2021, spanning Canada, the US, Asia, and Europe. And the definition of what we're doing has expanded a bit. So we started just in the world of at-risk customers and delinquency. Now it's any digital user case where you need to do a better job engaging with customers for the purposes of retention. So it's people that are unhappy with the service. It's people that you see not enough usage and you want to upsell them and bring them further into your world. It's anything where you want to raise NPS. So any kind of digital engagement strategy where you're trying to mitigate the churn, which is the biggest loss. The best way to kind of grow is to not lose customers. It's the cheapest way for these big companies. So we're hoping to hit. So we've grown quite a bit. I think the growth in the company over 4 years has been over 230 times.
Wow.
From the first time we valued the company to the last time we valued the company, I think it was like a 200x growth. We're hoping to end 2021 at about 100 million ARR, and 2022 and 250 million ARR. So it's if we execute on plan, we'll be the biggest tech company in the history of Alberta.
Wow.
Probably one of the biggest
goal.
in the history of Canada.
That's incredible.
Yeah, pretty easy guy to invest in, right?
No big deal. Yeah. Exactly. And Eve, thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for spending some time with us here.
Thanks, Eve.
What an incredible story.
Thanks
so much, Eve.
Incredible. And 4 years old. They're 4 years old.
That is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's CEMEND, the science of engagement. So before we move on to Tina Rinker and Cyantra, I just want to take a moment to remind everybody at home that we will have time for some questions at the end. So if you've got a question you're thinking about, take a moment, write it down. You can put it in the box right next to the video screen, and we'll get to those at the end of our little broadcast here. All right, so let's bring up Tina Rinker from Cyantra. So Tina, come on up. Cyantra is a life sciences company with a blood test to detect breast cancer. So when I first heard about this company, I could not believe this. Tina, I remember hearing you speak back at the launch event in January, and I was completely blown away about what you guys are up to. And I thought, these guys could really change the world. So Tina, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit more about Cyantra.
Well, Cyantra is changing the way that cancer is detected and treated. And this is through, initially, development of new tools to be able to detect cancer early and in a way that people will actually use it. So we're looking, initial product will be Cyantra DX Breast Cancer, available in early 2021. And you may say, okay, wait, there's already a way to detect breast cancer. We use mammography, right? But there's some issues there. One is in women under 50. Breast cancer is the leading killer of women under 50. And breast cancer is not detected so well by mammography with this age. So one, there's this population of younger women. Two, half of women have a different characteristic in their tissue density that leads to some difficulties with detection by mammography. So there's additional imaging that's needed to get to early detection. So Cyantra is addressing this by a molecular test, simple blood test, to be able to bring another tool to the market to enable greater participation as well as greater detection of early cancers.
Wow. It's so funny, James, when I hear Tina talk, I think of things like this global perspective that you have. I mean, how much bigger does it get than that, right?
Well, I mean, can you imagine getting out of bed and having to work on a project like this every day? It's hard, right?
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
It's so hard.
I jump out of bed as soon as the alarm clock goes off to work on this company.
There you go. Well, let's talk about that. So, Tina, tell us a little bit about your interactions with James Lochrie and Thin Air Labs and what that has meant for the growth and development of Cyantra.
Yeah, it's been fantastic working with James and the Thin Air team. James has helped us through some really challenging times, and we're working on a bold vision. We're working to push the envelope here. This is a field where there's not much going on that's available, and it takes the confidence and the support of James and the Thin Air team to really help push us, help us reach those bold goals.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what's next for Cyantra. I know you guys are in the middle of doing some fundraising.
Yep. So the first thing is to get the product to market.
Right.
So our product is initially, we've got the pieces in place, facility, the right approvals, everything in place, pushing forward towards that early 2021 availability of the blood test. So that's number one on the list, and the seed raise is part of enabling that to happen, as well as looking at expanding markets through targeted clinical studies in different geographies and different applications. So that means we're expanding our studies in the UK, which has a CE mark and ways to get into the market a little faster there. So that's a high priority for Cyantra. As well as we're in South Korea in some of our clinical studies there with our partners.
Wow.
So we're looking to have the seed raise now, and the new year we'll be looking more at gearing towards our Series A.
So exciting.
Yeah, so now's the time to get in.
You heard it here first. She's such a good salesperson.
Well, and let's take a second to pause on that.
Yeah.
Like, how often do you guys, anybody out there, have the opportunity to invest in a company that could save your mother's life, your daughter's life, your wife's life,
Yeah.
your sister's life?
Yeah.
Like that's what we're talking about here.
Right.
And we're talking about making small amounts of investment into a company that could have an incredible impact on people.
Right, right.
And this is a multi-billion-dollar company if it all works out well.
Right.
Kind of works for me. I like that, right? So they've got the whole package. And what I really love about this company is the resiliency that this team has shown. Because as Tina mentioned subtly, there has been some hard times here.
Right.
And this team, I've worked with you guys for about 3 years now, only recently was able to put the pieces in line to be able to start commercializing. And the hoops they had to jump to get to this point just shows me that there's nothing going to stop this team from being successful.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
So join them.
Yeah.
They're looking for
There you
partners.
go. So there you go. It also speaks to that idea of impact too, doesn't it, James?
Absolutely.
Right? That's
Yeah.
what I think of often when I think of Cyantra, that human impact. I mean, it's exponential, really. Yeah.
I mean, who's not going to pay for that test?
Right?
Right.
Exactly. So there you go.
Yeah.
Tina, thank you so much for being
Thank you.
here
Thanks, Tina.
and for telling
Thank
us
you
your
very
story. Thanks so much. You can head off.
Okay, thanks.
And we'll move on from there. Thank you so much. All right. So next we're going to talk to Adrian Camara from Athenian. And Athenian is a legal entity management platform. Adrian, come on up. There he is.
Hi, how are you?
We're really well.
Hey.
Thank
Do I
you
have to
so
move
much
the
for
chairs,
being
or do
here.
they have to, are they in a
Just
special?
stay.
We're just
Stay
we're
over
just
there.
staying
Oh,
our
okay.
physically distanced, you know, COVID and all that jazz. Yes.
James said that before COVID.
Stay, keep away, right? Why don't you tell us a little bit about Athenian?
Yeah, so Athenian is a subsidiary management software. So really what we do is we help our customers manage high volumes of business entities. So you can think of a business entity as a corporation, a limited partnership, an LLC, a trust. Those are some names of more domestic entities. And then as we take a global view, we start having more exotic flavors of entities. And so really what we're helping our customers do is manage the data around who owns those entities, what is the control and the governance profile look like, and what's the tax profile of those entities. And then we automate all kinds of workflow around it. And what's really exciting about the space right now is in legal, there's a real race to create the platform, sort of this sort of central nervous system as legal is digitizing. And so you can see the success that Clio's having with their $300 million financing that they did last year. That's really in the SMB space, but in the enterprise market, it's a wide open race, and we think that Athenian's going to win it.
Wow, exciting.
I think so too.
Well, clearly, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. Adrian, tell us a little bit about your interactions with James Lochrie and the Thin Air Labs team and what that has meant to the growth and development of your company.
Yeah, so similar to Hanif, my interactions with James have been interesting and varied.
Interesting and varied.
Interesting and varied, yeah. But all in a positive way. So I first met James when I was still working at a law firm at a startup Calgary event. How I would describe James and how he's helped me as an entrepreneur is there's a lot of people, especially in the Canadian venture capital market, that say that they're really good at finding winners. James is really good at making winners. And so when we first met, I had zero idea what I was doing at all. James really gave me a lot of orientation about how to think about the world. He gave us access to our first customers, so relationship capital. He eventually gave us financial capital. But really importantly, and something that is often not talked about, is that he gave us, and particularly me, a lot of emotional capital. It's extremely scary, especially when you're a first-time entrepreneur, to start a business like this. You leave a career you work so hard to start or have pre-existing success in. And your wife or your husband is looking at you like you're totally nuts. It makes no sense. A lot of the time your co-founders, your team or your customers or your family is doubting you. And that's really scary. And so what James provides, which I think comes back to him being a successful entrepreneur, and he's been through that, is that emotional capital. And that's what gives you the resilience to command the space that you occupy, take massive swings when everybody is looking at you thinking that you have absolutely no basis to be taking those swings, and you look like you're nuts. But in the world that James brings you into, you're winning. And that's what winning looks like.
Thank you for that, Adrian. Tell us a little bit more about what's next for Athenian. Where are you guys going? What are you going for in 2021?
Yeah, so my goal is our market cap needs to catch up to Hanif's. So that's goal number one. He's beating me right now. No, look, I mean, right now we have over 1 million legal entities in Athenian that are being managed by our customers. We have over 100 million unique data points on these entities. We're building the relationship graph of what private companies look like. And we're going to continue to solve problems for our customers and aggregate that data. And I can get specific about what that looks like, but it's really about doubling or tripling or 10xing our market cap. It's about doing the same to our staff numbers and our customer numbers. And we're a global company now. We have customers around the world. We have employees across Canada, across the United States, and in Europe. So we're going to continue to expand that.
Congratulations, that's so great. Adrian, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story with us.
Adrian.
Do I go now?
Yeah, you can totally go now.
Get out of here and get back to the market cap problem you got.
So, I mean, how do you feel hearing about that? I'm curious about your reaction to all of these guys saying such wonderful things about.
Well, it's incredibly humbling because those three people have my incredible respect. They are taking big swings at meaningful problems. They're risking their reputations, they're risking their financial futures, and they're creating all this opportunity for all these other people, including their customers. And to have them say those types of things and the influence that myself and my team have had on them is very humbling. But at the same time, validating that we're doing the right things, that we're supporting the right types of people on the right journeys, and we're pulling together the right team to be able to support them in the right way. So it's encouraging, validating, and humbling all at the same time.
Well, there you go. Doesn't that lead nicely into the idea of a fund?
It does.
So yes, let's tell everybody about the Thin Air Labs Fund.
Yeah, we're going to have to move that screen up a little bit so I can talk about it.
Yes, we have lots of things to talk about when it comes to the fund.
I think it's the other way, isn't it? So, the past number of years has really validated what we've been doing here. It's allowed us to test an investment model. It's allowed us to test a operational model that is different than what other people do, and that's what I call entrepreneurial investing. I am an entrepreneur first and foremost. Yes, I'm an investor. I'm good at that job, but first and foremost, I'm a good entrepreneur, and I love working and building businesses. And that's what we've done at Thin Air Labs, and that's what we continue to do with our partners that we bring on as entrepreneurs. So we're going to take that validation in the market, and we're going to raise a fund. It's going to be a traditional venture fund with the traditional 2+20 model. So we're going to have a 2% fee on it that will help keep the lights on and pay for some of the great talent that you've already seen here to partner with these entrepreneurs to help them grow their companies and de-risk our investments and help accelerate them. The 20% is aligning us with the success of everybody else. We're going to be raising a minimum of $100 million, and our stretch goal is $300 million. So we are ambitious about what we're trying to achieve here because we think the opportunities in front of us are that big and that obvious to us.
Right.
We already have $11 million committed by the Thin Air Labs team into this fund, so we are heavily invested ourselves into this thesis. So we have complete alignment with anybody else who chooses to join us. And our thesis is really simple. We've talked about it. We invest early into companies. We support those companies through their growth. As they reach maturity and we get more complex investors and institutions coming in, more strategic things happening, and as those companies scale into global complex companies that may need to IPO or have exits, we want those companies to partner with other institutional investors to help lead those future investment rounds, and that's where we have the opportunity to follow on into our existing winners that are continuing that pathway and double down into those types of investments. So we will invest early, and we will continue following along as these companies continue to grow and see success. And ultimately, to be able to do that at the scale we want to do it, we need your help. Everybody out there, We need you guys to come and invest with us. This is the time. So we can look at it from the standpoint of economics. I can sit down and talk to you and explain economics and how we can return capital here all day long. It's easy to do. This is a great opportunity economically. But more importantly, when we think about being citizens, if we're living in the prairies, if you've been affected by what's happening economically and now socially as an outcome of that, this is our time to step up. This is our time to put money to work, to invest in our own backyard, to invest in our own people, and create something really magical and build what's next. Like literally be part of building something that's next. And that's what the opportunity that we're going to give to everybody here. And I would love your participation and support as we go through that. And so that's why we're here, is to legitimately ask you to do that.
There you go. You heard it here first. How much can we get you down for, right? That's what we're talking about here
Exactly.
today. Terrific. So, James, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
We're going to bring Jim and Greg back up to the set, and we've got some time now for your questions and answers. So I know we've got a few of them coming ahead, but let's go take a look. Let's get these guys back in. Thanks so much for coming back, Jim and Greg. We'll fire some questions your way as well, I am sure. You can take the masks off, have a moment to breathe, right? It's so good. Okay, so we've got some questions coming in here. So at what stage do you invest? Seed, angel, VC, PE, minimum, maximum amount? James, do you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah, so we invest everywhere up to the Series A. And we'll do follow-ons beyond that, but up to the Series A, we'll do our first investment. Investing in the Series A will be hard for us because the returns may not be there for our profile. So there's only specific companies that we do that with, and likely those are companies we've worked with in the past for whatever reason. But primarily, we will focus on the earliest stage of companies. So with Hanif, we invested before there was a company, before there was really a prototype or anything like that. So as early as possible, when we can, for the right people who are building the right products in the right market. We tend to be after the initial little bit of capital that might come from founders and their friends and family, where they've formed up something and have something going on. We'll normally put in a little investment at that point. We're targeting about a $750,000 investment in that stage. If we look to a later seed stage where they're typically raising around $2 million-ish, at a little bit higher valuation, we'll probably play in that 1 to 1.2 million range in that and continue following that along. If we go into the larger Series A type of investment, it will be on a case-by-case basis, the amount of capital we would put into that.
Okay, There you go. We'll take another question. Are there unique challenges for founder-based in Alberta or in the Prairies? How will you address these unique challenges? Do you want to take that one, James?
Yeah, I can take that one.
Sure.
I think this is an area where we need to get out of our own way, if I'm just being frank.
Right.
Every startup, every entrepreneur, every business has its own unique challenges. It doesn't matter where they live, where the geography is. This is an excuse that has been used in our region forever to prevent us from investing deeply in this area. We have shown you people here that are creating tomorrow's businesses right here. There's nothing stopping us other than our own constraints that we put on it. So are there unique issues that affect us here? I'm sure there are. Access to capital can be more difficult. Access to certain types of talent can be more difficult. But that's no different than, it's just a different type of scale that these problems happen at versus other ones. Great founders will just blow right past those problems. We'll find solutions. So
That's what we do.
Let's not worry about that.
There you go. I like the sound of that. It looks like this is another question for you, James. What do you look for in co-investors?
So primarily, I get out of the way when it comes to that stuff. I look for alignment with the founder. And so when I talk to the founder about creating a great environment for them to be successful in, it's always great when we have a great working relationship with investors that come on board. That makes things a lot easier, but that's not necessary. And I would never get in the way of one of my companies working with an investor who I might look at and go,
Right.
But if they're the ones that are right for that company, then that's great. If we're looking specifically, I do coach my entrepreneurs to look about strategic investing. Who brings more than just capital? It's okay sometimes if it's just capital coming.
Sure.
Somebody quietly just wants to make money off of what you're doing, that's great. But are there people that bring more? Do they bring customers? Do they bring experience? Do they bring talent to the table? that's an extra bonus for co-investors, especially in the early stages of the company.
There you go, especially in those early stages. That's right. Greg, looks like we've got a question for you. So Greg, how do you de-risk investments in the earliest stages? What does this actually look like? And what role does the design team play in this?
Oh, that's a pretty simple answer. I would say that the best way to look at this is that contrasting it to other strategies where there's sort of like a big lineup of people at the door. They come in, they make their pitch, they get their shot, and if it doesn't go well, then away they go. And so that huge pivotal decision that's normally found in investment, we actually kind of step around that a bit, and we'll start working with organizations well before we'd even think about, is it require an actual capital investment or not? So basically it's engaging with founders at the level where their idea makes a lot of sense. You know, taking all their assumptions for granted and saying, wow, like in the future, this could be a great thing. It's a good team of people. And then working with them to figure out what's next. I mean, building what's next is not just a tagline. I mean, for us, it's actually the way we think about working. And so the way that the design team plays in there is, you know, as James mentioned a bit earlier, like every team has certain things they're really good at, other things that they're not quite as strong at. And especially when teams are early, they can't really have everything that they need. And so what we are able to bring with the design team is this sort of really cross-sectoral approach, different viewpoints, different specialized skills that can help build their organizations and build their product or experience so that it can get to the next step. And always answering that question about what's next is actually one of the most powerful de-risking moves that we can make, because it's not saying, hey, what's next is you need $10 million. What's next might be to solve a problem that costs nothing to solve, but changes the trajectory of the business. And I think in some of the stories that, you know, that James has shared, and with the great founders who've been here today, they've all had experiences like that, where there were things that in tough times, it wasn't necessarily money that solved the issue. There were actually other things that come into play. So we don't believe that 80 to 90% of businesses that try to start up should just fail, because there's a lot of great stuff there that if they get the right support at the right time to figure out what they need to do next, then we can de-risk using our team to do that.
There you go. That makes me think often too of what Adrian was talking about, just that, you know, validation from a friend figure, a mentor figure saying, you know, you are on the right track, it is okay, you're gonna make this work, that's gonna be okay. Yeah, for sure. All right, Jim, we've got a question for you, I see it here. What's missing in the Calgary tech community that creates risk for the success of this fund? How will you address this?
It's a good one. A couple of answers to that. I think there's two answers. I think number one, I think that the tech ecosystem that we currently have is frankly relatively immature. If we look at the global ecosystems around the world and where we find ourselves as Calgary, we're about 1/10 of the way there. We need to 10x the talent. We need to 10x the number of people coming in the top of the start, the funnel. We need to move with velocity and urgency. So, as I like to often say, we're 10 years late to a 20-year problem. We need to move a lot more quickly. There's a sense of urgency here that's sometimes lacking that we as a thin air team want to change. When there's a way, there's a will. When we want to show people the Athenians and the Cements and the companies like that, we want to show examples of that. So that's number one. The other thing that I worry about, and the thing that we guard against as thin air, is this notion of the culture of trust. There's an expression we use here at Thin Air, is that trust is exponential. And when we start working together as organizations, both post-secondary institutions, government, our not-for-profits, and companies like ours, when we work in that culture of trust, we actually can move far, far faster than normal, because we have to catch up. We can't wait. We can't be Waterloo, we have to be better than Waterloo. We can't be the Valley, we have to reinvent what that means. Right. And so that culture of trust is something, I remember my bucket comment, it's the same thing. We've got to continually fill that up. And that's a danger to the ecosystem, is that we get siloed and we start to think of ourselves as the only answer to the problem. That's the one that Thin Air and the community side is going to be very much on guard against.
Absolutely.
And I was just going to say, I think it's really important too that, like, we don't take any of that for granted.
No.
So, you know, if we looked at those risks that exist in the community, we're not sitting back and saying, well, I hope somebody comes along and fills in that little patch over there. We're being really proactive about this and extending our model to make sure that it takes in that whole systems perspective, because it's a completely legitimate and important question. If we're unable to do that, then it does increase risk, right? And so we have been really proactive in that area. James mentioned Inception and talent programs, and there are other partnerships that we're forming right now that are global, that create the opportunity that Jim's talking about, which is to leapfrog our current position as a community, because we can't afford to follow the same exact path that everybody else has followed. We don't have 20 years to do that. So it's part of our work every day. We're not waiting for somebody else to figure that out.
That's right. We're going to take charge, for sure. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the global pandemic. There's a question right here for it. What opportunities does the COVID pandemic provide? James, do you want to tackle that one first?
The story hasn't been written yet, what's going to happen here. And so this level of uncertainty actually plays really well into the mentality of innovation. And so we're going to see creative solutions come out of all kinds of places over the next little while as smart, creative, technical people start solving problems that have been created by COVID. So I believe we're going to see a rush of COVID, pandemic style or related type of innovation that comes out. It may not be around healthcare, but there's going to be other things that are related to it. So that's one thing. Another thing that's really important, and I think on a global basis, is the change in the money supply. So previous to the pandemic, the money supply was very high. Now it's even higher. So the amount of capital that can be invested into these types of companies has gone up significantly. We're starting to see the exponential growth in big tech as the market caps of these companies approach $2 trillion. So this is the money supply, and how that's changing will have a dramatic impact on how fast this technology grows. And then finally, it's demand.
Right.
So when you think about how enterprises had to react, how school and education has had to react, how individuals have had to react, it's the adoption of technologies and efficiencies that has allowed the world to continue to operate in a way where we haven't wanted to pull all our hair out. Well, maybe we have.
Just a little bit.
A little bit. But that increase in demand in technology, I do not believe that's going to slow down. I think as people continue to get more comfortable adding more and more pieces of technology to their life, that's just going to continue to accelerate, creating more opportunities for our entrepreneurs to be successful.
There you go. Jim, I can tell you've got something to add.
No, I just wanted to add, and James well said, I watched 9 schools that say completely reimagine themselves over a weekend.
Wow.
And that's remarkable, and it's great, and it's exciting. But what it taught me and what I observed was the speed at which the average person, a dean or instructor or somebody could actually see themselves as an innovator. So literally in a moment of crisis, they were able to reimagine what education and online learning looked like. They understood agile, they understood fail fast, they understood how innovation happens so quickly, and they did it. And what happens when that happens is when the average person becomes an innovator, becomes somebody like that, is they pass that culture of possibility along. So I witnessed it in literally the post-secondaries here in town, and I'm just in awe of what they did. But what I'm more interested in is what it'll do going forward is they present that opportunity to their students, to their faculty, and so forth. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then there goes the talent development, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it uncovered so many problems.
Yeah.
It continues
right.
to, it's like an archaeological expedition basically, that COVID and the experience of the pandemic is pulling layers back that, or at least making some things visible to people that weren't visible before. And an anecdote to support Jim's point there, which is really funny, a very large organization said to me, we had a 5-year plan for digital transformation. And we executed our 5-year plan for digital transformation in 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
Because they had to.
Yes.
So I mean, the 5-year plan was an excuse not to digitally transform. And when something like COVID happens, to James's point, it drives all those technological requirements right to the front, because you have to just do it or what. So yeah, it's an interesting time.
And that mindset, that rapid iterative change that happened in that very short period of time, Now everybody knows they can do it.
Yes.
Right.
So there's no excuses when the next thing comes along, the next opportunity to implement efficiencies or new technologies, because they're coming every day. So people have now learned that they're competent at it, that it's not as a scary thing as it used to be for people. So I expect the adoption rates just to continue to increase.
Yeah, we often talk about receptor capacity.
Right.
How do big organizations absorb new ideas and startup technologies? This has shown them that they don't need to be afraid of that. It's actually quite a bit easier than they thought it would be. So that's quite a hopeful piece.
It is very hopeful. I'm just going to take note that we are coming up to 5 o'clock, but we do have quite a few questions here. So we're going to stick around, but if you have to go, thank you so much for being here. Look for a follow-up email from us. We'll be in touch with you shortly, but we will stay here with you for those of you who've got some questions, and we're going to answer those in just a moment here. So James, I've got one more question coming to you here, and this is a pretty good one. So your success investing in early stage tech startups seems to be correlated with your skills as an entrepreneur and your ability to coach and mentor founders you invest in. Do you think this strategy will scale and work for a large fund, not just your own capital, and how?
Yeah, so that's a
good question.
Great question. It's always the
We ask it every day.
That's really unearthing one of the big issues around managing money. And it's managing a small amount of capital. You can do incredible things, and it's a lot more difficult to do it with a larger amount of capital. The opportunities that we see in this market are large. The companies that are inside of the portfolio today, I'm expecting will raise anywhere between 150 and $250 million over the next 12 to 18 months. So that gives you a sense of scale that's happening here. So the ticket numbers seem large, but they could be deployed in large chunks. So that's one thing that's important to understand. The other thing is really about how Thin Air Labs was built. And we've talked about this from the beginning. It's built off of these really strong principles that are shared by everyone, every airhead, which we call it.
Which is what we call ourselves, yeah.
So when we think about it, that founder first principle, no ego in front of a founder, big markets, human impact. Those are all shared attributes that all of us as Thin Air have, and it's how we approach our job day to day. That is how we are going to scale out our organization. The second part of that is the type of people we bring into it. Obviously, we've got to see two great parts of Thin Air here. These guys make me look great every single day. We talk the same way, we act the same way, we behave around founders the same way. And that's no different than you and how you interact with founders, or Crystal or Andrew or anybody else in Thin Air. And that's what I've seen happen. With my business partner, Kirk, we built Wave. And there was probably maybe 150 people in that organization before we hired a real accountant. So we built in a global accounting system without accountants. I was the only one with domain expertise. So when you think about the impact that you can have when you set principles the right way, coach people the right way, get the right types of people on your team, you can make magic happen. And I expect that will continue at Thin Air Labs as we scale up.
As we scale up, there you go. Okay, it looks like we've got one more here for you, James. Your target, $300 million for this fund, is ambitious, especially for a first fund. How do you justify this?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple just to look at the math. We've found opportunities to put small amounts of money to work in early stages of company, help them get to a state where they can absorb large amounts of capital, where we can double down into them. The difference between what we've been doing in the past and what we want to do in the future is we haven't had those large chunks of capital to support our companies as we move forward. That's it. So just adding in that extra capital is the only real change that we're making here. And it is a lot of capital. That's a significant amount of money. It's a lot of responsibility that we take incredibly seriously. And if we get the privilege of being able to use that money to help support our entrepreneurs, we will do everything we possibly can to ensure that that's treated with the amount of respect it deserves. And that's why we're putting up a significant amount of capital as well, is to make sure that we're completely aligned with what's happening with our investors and what they're trying to achieve. Because we want to achieve it too, because at the end of the day, it's about returning capital to our investors and returning a lot more than they gave us. And we want that from our capital as well, and we want that for our entrepreneurs. And then we want to go and do it again, and then do it again, and do it again, because this is what we do.
Right.
Every single day, from the day we were young, this is what we do. We didn't just back our way into technology and innovation. I was at Radio Shack when I was 10 years old learning to write software. this is what I do, and this is what our team does. So this is why we believe that we are going to be good stewards of this, and the opportunity is right there for us to help drive those types of investment returns.
There you go. Okay, it looks like we've got one last question. How do we break this cycle of being a startup nation where our startup companies are acquired by foreign firms and our talent and tech capacity moves away? Who wants to tackle this one? I'm looking at you, Jim.
I'll start, and trust me, I know we've had this conversation. I think, again, it goes back to that conversation about where we are as in the maturity cycle of an ecosystem. I mean, I'm not too fussed by this, to be fair, at this particular point in time. It's a natural cycle of innovation ecosystems as they grow. Our job is that they don't have to go elsewhere for the very raw material that makes them grow and scale. A, capital, B, talent, and C is different kinds of talent that you wouldn't expect. So one of the things that we need to make sure we have is not just full stack software engineers and design experts, but we need product leaders. We need executives who've actually scaled and built companies like that. So while it's a concern, I would argue that it's a natural place in an ecosystem like ours. Our job is to move that quickly.
Right. Greg, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, and Jim's right. I mean, we've talked about this. This is an absolutely superb question. And because it's kind of the branch plant economy question, which has kind of plagued the country for a long, long time. And getting into this situation there's an issue of critical mass here, in the sense that there has to be a magnetism that develops. And we, in the very beginning of Thin Air, I mean, one of the concepts that we talked about, the three of us, was creating this impression of that came from where? Like that people in the other part of the world would say, what? That company came from there, or that this idea is growing here? And that's a very important piece to this, because this is when people talk about brand and everything, but there is a moment where we establish a critical mass about something that's happening here that's meaningful to what the rest of the world is trying to deal with. And the moment that we get to that, then we're in a position to reverse this flow. So that in fact what happens is companies start coming here, our companies start buying other companies. And we've worked with people around the world who've been involved in Silicon Valley and other things, and they've always said to us, you have a chance to build something here which has a different personality. And that is not trying to be bigger or better, but to be a different personality. And so that, like when people ask the question about how do we do this in this place, it's actually one of the biggest opportunities we have, is to do it in this place.
It's a counterintuitive play, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like we got one more question.
Let's go.
I'll give it to you, James,
Yeah,
really
sure.
quickly. Please describe the demographic of your investors and LPs, and how should they get involved?
Okay, so we're all over the map when it comes to the people that we're talking to invest in the fund. So from large institutions across a spectrum of different type of industry, high net worth individuals and families, other tech entrepreneurs, and then there's even small investors who have put up their hand and said, how do I get involved? How do I participate financially in this? I don't have access to this asset class. So it really is across the spectrum of types of people and geographies. So we do have, obviously, Calgary is our backyard, and that's where we've obviously created the deepest network. But we are a global company. We are talking to people in Dubai, we're talking to people across Canada, into the US. So we're trying to look at this from a global perspective and how we build out a massive company that has a global impact right here.
Right here. We're going to do it here. Yeah. I like the sound of that. Jim, I have one last question for you. It just came into my mind because we also like to talk a lot about hope here and how there really is an opportunity to create some hope and some inspiration for the future, and not just the future for us, but the future for everyone. So we want everyone involved in this idea. Jim, can you just take a moment to quickly talk on that as we wrap this up?
Well, I think we've set the stage. We've put the pieces in place. We've invested our own time and our capital and our companies and so forth. But I keep coming in, Greg and I, when we first started this and then talking with James, we kept coming back to the concept of when there's a way, there's a will. And Greg, I remember he first said that to me, and I went, no, you got to back. He goes, listen to what I'm saying. When there's a way, there's a will. And the big challenge with Calgary and Alberta has always been, in my experience, and I think ours, is that there hasn't been that way. There hasn't somebody who stood up and said, this is the way that we can actually build the future and be the place where we want to be. And so when I think about it, or when we get into our own heads and trying to build this, we always come back to that expression. When there's a way, there's a will, and people will follow. And we're going to do that.
We sure are. I think that's a wonderful place to stop. I want to thank all three of you for being here. I have to tell you at home, it's very exciting to have all three of these guys in one place at the same time.
And like Maven Media.
Yes, exactly.
Like, local company, young entrepreneurs, they put this together, and it's been incredible. And they're just down the street here.
They are, right here in the Beltline.
I think they're doing it better than most people that I've ever heard of. So if you're looking for a streaming service, look no further than just in our own backyard here, where we've got Maven Media.
There you go. They're all laughing and clapping back there, that's for sure. So thank you to the founders as well. Thank you to Hanif and to Tina and to Adrian for coming down. And yes, thank you so much to Maven Media for doing such a fantastic job of bringing this to you. But we also want to take a moment and say thank you so much to you watching online, our allies and our friends, for being curious about what we're trying to do, for being curious about what's possible here in the Prairies. And, look for a follow-up email from us, and let's go build what's next. Thanks so much for being here.